Hello, welcome to a video of Reflexive Performance Reset and basically the quad reset signs. So if you're a coach, these are some basic signs in your athletes that you need a quad reset from the RPR system. Moving ahead, the basic quad issues that athletes show. Quads are not always the cause of the issues that we're going to show you here, especially in sports movements such as running, which is probably the best indicator that you have a issue, whether it be a compensation pattern, some type of movement problem. Running to me has always been the most optimal movement pattern possible to evaluate somebody. These issues with compensation patterns, they're often a reflection of some dysfunction in the body somewhere else, but it could be the actual quad itself. However, whenever you see these signs, the quad is something that needs to be addressed. So moving ahead, the basic quad issues that athletes show, whether it's be laying on the table and or dynamic signs, meaning when they're running, which again, running is by far the best way to look at an athlete and evaluate their movement qualities. The first one's large, juicy quads. These athletes have extremely overdeveloped quads. The next one is the various tissue signs that you can see. The other one for coaches that are pretty, you'll see after this, you'll be somewhat of an expert at these issues that appear, but the biomechanical movement signs and the causes and the reasons for these issues and things that actually happen from having a quad dominant athlete. So the question always arises, why are the quads so much bigger? So for the athlete on the left here, you see these quads that are pretty high. Here's another athlete with large quads, and here's another athlete that doesn't have the large quads. So you can see, the teardrops, VMO, people ask about that. The reason for this is that the quad is not only the knee extensor, it also helps with hip flexion. So basically the quad is now becoming two main uses. And that's why there's adaptation in hypertrophy. Now, the problem with this is this is the indicator that there's something wrong, okay? Unless you're doing large amounts of isolated quad work, which an athlete should never be doing, because it can also cause these problems. If you're a bodybuilder, that's great. Now, what happens when you have large quads like this, actually they'll become fatigued early. So when your athlete's running and their quads are burning, it's a sure sign that they have some form of quad dominance. And the reason for that quad dominance is because, again, the quad's doing the main part of knee extension and hip flexion, and that's because the psoas isn't working optimally. Okay, and I'm going to show you signs when athletes are on the track or the course or the field when the psoas is not working correctly. Now, the other things that happen is that, remember here, if the psoas in this area is not working, then the compensation chain, it moves down, so then the quad becomes the main hip flexor instead of the psoas, and then above that superficially is the abdominals and the midsection, okay? And what happens is that transpires is you'll see that there's a ton of, if you check, the athlete has a really thick core, but this core is not the optimal functioning core that you want. So this actually squeezes down, it actually pulls the ribs down and can pull this athlete's shoulders forward and down also. So, and then the abs also become the main stabilizers for the hips versus the quads and the lateral sling. What will actually appear in this athlete, because of this tight midsection, is that they don't have very much mobility, and many people assume that it's the thoracic spine that is the reason. However, the thoracic spine might not have mobility, but quite often it's due to the quads are locked up tight, and then the thoracic becomes immobile because of lack of, obviously, just not functioning correctly with mobility, okay? Now, again, these ribs that are tucked down can be caused by, it would be actually a cross. So this quad works with these abs, and both sets of ribs will pull down. And then what transpires, if you've seen my glute firing pattern video, which will happen is then if these abs are locked tight, ribs start to be pulled down, everything's compressed in here because the quad and the abs work together, the QL will essentially lock up, and then it becomes a primary driver of hip extension. So yes, I'm telling you, the front part can definitely have an effect on the back part of the athlete. So what I'm saying is, if there's a quad dominant, you'll often find sometimes that the glute is not the primary hip extensor, okay, or where the hip extensor pattern starts. Now you need to find my glute firing pattern video to view that. Okay, now one of the things I want you to realize is that the big quads are not a sign of optimal performance. Many times you'll have athletes get by with them and perform even at high levels. But in my experience with RPR and correcting the function of the body, because remember, the large quads are a sign that there's dysfunction in the body, what happens is the athlete's quads in a matter of no time become slightly smaller. And some people are saying, well, I don't want that. But here's the end results, and this is what the RPR does so well. You will actually run faster and jump higher when your quads get smaller. Not because the quads were the cause, but the quads aren't doing all the extra work. They're able to perform at higher levels because the tissue's not trying to adapt all the time. And the rest of the body that isn't working correctly is now functioning at a higher level because of the RPR reset. So keeping that in mind, that don't be afraid to cause the quads to become smaller when trying to get the athlete to perform optimally at all levels, especially if your sport depends upon speed, power, and explosiveness and reactiveness.